Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Please note that all audience member microphones are muted. And if you have questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any technical issues, just let us know in the chat box at the bottom of the screen and we'll help you out. And thank you for joining us. Now, before we begin, I'd like to give the land acknowledgement. The NIA is based in Toronto, which is in the Dish with One Spoon territory, and the Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We have a very exciting webinar for you today. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bonnie Jean McDonald, who will give the presentation, after which we will turn to a Q&A.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Barbara. I'm delighted to be here, of course, and thank you all for joining us. So by way of background, my name is Bonnie G. McDonald. I'm the resident scholar at Eckler, where I've been for over a decade. That role has actually given me a pretty unique opportunity early in my career to really bring research to reality and develop ideas and tools that actually help real people. I'm also the Director of Financial Security at the National Institute on Aging at Toronto Metropolitan University, where I'm also the founder and co-lead, along with Barbara, of Canada's Pension Centre of Excellence. This is the largest national collaboration of stakeholders working together to carry out world-class research that will strengthen our retirement income system. So the NIA is one of Canada's most impactful research institutes. We started almost a decade ago with a very unique mandate, not only to help Canada's aging population from a financial lens, but also to bring together the health and the wealth sides of aging. Because the reality is that financial security is actually not just about how much money you're going to have. It needs to take a holistic approach and incorporate all the factors that affect our well-being. And that's what the NIA aims to do. And that's really what I'm passionate about. Combine what we learn from the academic research world with insights from government and industry in Canada and around the world, put it together so we can come up with better solutions that are going to more effectively help Canada's aging population. So I'm so excited to be sharing one of those solutions with you today. This is the same presentation that we were invited to do and deliver earlier this month to Canada's federal, provincial, and territorial officials responsible for the CPP. So it's going to be great. I'm going to begin by discussing the growing challenges that Canada faces, and then a new solution that we call the Pension Delay Guarantee, or PDG. With me are my esteemed co-authors, Doug Chandler. He's a career pension actuary turned researcher at the NIA, and Barbara Saunders, who you just met. She's an associate professor at Simon Fraser University. She's also the co-lead of the Pension Centre of Excellence at the NIA. So this presentation is about 40 minutes. Then we're going to turn to questions with Doug and Barbara. And before I begin, just a quick note to say that our solution initially had a very different name in our paper publication, in case you actually saw that old version. The idea hasn't changed, but the name has. All right, so let's get started. To set the stage, retirement income security means being able to maintain your standard of living throughout retirement. But we can begin to see the gaps and the challenges that Canadians are going to face by first looking at a snapshot of the Canadian retirement income system. Our public pensions, CPP, QPP, and OAS will typically provide around $20,000 per year of inflation index pension income. The rest has to come from workplace pensions and personal savings. But here's the problem. Over 60% of workers lack any workplace pension plan, mostly in the private sector, where 90% actually lack a defined benefit or DB pension plan that will offer that secure income for life after retirement. Now, the social policy expectation was that this drop in DB pension coverage would be offset by a rise in private savings. That hasn't happened. And even for those who have saved in RSPs and TFSAs, these tax-deferred savings actually lack one important element. They don't actually provide pensions. These are saving accounts that don't actually give that secure lifelong income that will protect a person's retirement financial security. And keep in mind, even if a person does save, for the average person to actually manage and effectively draw down the savings in retirement, that's not just a difficult task, it's actually an impossible task. They will need to manage a pot of money that will grow in an unknown way to pay for unknown expenses, whose costs are going to grow in an unknown way because of inflation, over most of all, an unknown time horizon. We don't know how long we're going to live, and that could span, days or decades. So this is really an impossible task. It really does leave older adults in a very bad situation if they were to run out of money at this kind of advanced vulnerable age. So the absence of DB workplace pensions in the private sector has created a type of structural gap in our retirement income system. And in the past, advocacy efforts has largely been, and rightly so, been with low income older adults. That's the bottom third. Those are the one people who go into retirement and they're going to rely primarily on GIS and OAS to sustain their standard of living. And while that group will continue to exist and they're going to grow, the picture of retirement income security and adequacy in Canada will dramatically change over the next 30 years because of that structural gap that I just mentioned. And the group actually most at risk is what we're going to call here the vulnerable massive middle. They're about between the 30th and the 85th income percentiles. They are the target group of today's solution. They share these traits. First of all, they're private sector workers who, unlike their parents, lack workplace DB pensions. And that's about 90% of private sector workers. They're also part of the massive middle. They're not low income, again, not the ones relying on GIS and OAS support, but they're also not high income. They're not that top 15% who can really self-insure in retirement. In other words, they're actually the backbone of Canada's workforce and tomorrow's retirees, and they make up a third of our older population. And the picture for them does get worse. It is really a perfect storm. Not only do they not have those workplace defined benefit pensions their parents did, which means less secure income as they age, at the same time, the price tag of their retirement is actually going up. Life expectancy is at a historical peak, and family size is at a historic low. And what many people simply don't realize is that historically, and even true today, it's actually adult children, not the government, who've provided most of the in-home care for older parents. But baby boomers were actually not only the first generation to live the longest, they're also the first generation in history to have relatively few children. And without that support, the massive middle must prepare then to finance a longer retirement with less income and higher out-of-pocket costs like long-term care. And if they can't weather this storm and they fail to self-finance their retirement, which study after study has said that they won't, the ripple effect won't just be personal for them, it's actually national. Government spending will rise on GIS and other income tested programs, both provincially and federally. Health costs are going to increase as financial strain on older adults lead to poorer nutrition and poorer housing and therefore poorer health outcomes. And increasingly, what we'll see is more intergenerational strain because adult children will have to step out of the workforce to actually provide care for aging parents who can't afford to do it on their own. So the retirement income adequacy for the massive middle, it's not just a personal issue, it's actually a policy imperative. We have the largest population cohort in Canadian history moving into retirement, and hidden within this new group, the massive middle, are unknowingly facing a perfect storm of long-term financial insecurity that will have direct social and economic repercussions for Canada. And the biggest challenge is that the massive middle is hidden from the very people who can change this. As one of my colleagues put it, none of us who make policy decisions is in the massive middle. So policymakers, academics, they are not part of this group. So their challenges are very easy to miss. But they aren't marginal. They're actually mainstream. And as I noted, they are projected to make up a whopping third of our older population. Why isn't this on the front page of every newspaper? That's because they're actually not in a crisis yet. They're entering retirement now with some health, some wealth, and still a bit of time to make good decisions. But if we don't have effective supports right now, Study after study has shown that they're heading straight towards a retirement adequacy crisis. So, what the massive middle needs most of all is more DB like pension income, and that means predictable, lifelong inflation protected pensions. The great news here is that Canada already has a built in solution, and it's as close to a silver bullet as we're ever going to get. It doesn't require new programs, it doesn't require new taxes. It's already right there in the existing system. And that's the option that people have to delay their CPP or QPP benefits when they claim them. So as we know, CPP and QPP, they do form the first pillar of the Canadian retirement income system. This first pillar is the single largest source of retirement income for older Canadians, and for many, it's actually their only meaningful source of secure inflation indexed income. Because the massive middle doesn't have workplace DB plans, CPP, QPP, along with OAS are extremely important to them. Actually, in our NIA survey, 9 out of 10 recipients say that their CPP or QPP benefits are an important part of their retirement income, and 6 out of 10 actually say they're essential. They cannot live without this pension. And you don't have to take CPP and QPP as soon as you retire. You can start anytime between ages 60 and 70 for CPP or even up to age 72 for QPP. And the benefits increase for every month that you wait. Now, in fact, if you wait all the way from age 60 to age 70, you're going to more than double the pension that you could have received. So basically, the age 70 pension, if you put the math together, is more than double that of the age 60 pension. Now, if waiting to 72 was an option, there would be even a bigger increase. Though through my research over the past decade, I found that delaying CPP and QPP is really the most misunderstood, underused, but optimal decumulation strategy we have available. It's one of the most powerful ways for the vulnerable massive middle to improve their retirement financial security in retirement. It's effectively, to put it a different way, it's like buying an inflation index secure DB pension at a price unmatched anywhere in the private market. Now, if you were actually tried to go and buy a commercial annuity that provided that same income, you'd only get about half as much as what you would get by delaying benefits. So this is almost a financial arbitrage opportunity. It's a very rare win. And the big question is, well, can people even afford to delay their benefits? Well, thankfully, back a few years ago, we used a highly sophisticated population microsimulation model, and we found that over the past decade, more than half of Canadians could have delayed taking benefits by at least a year, and a quarter could have actually have delayed more than 10 years using only their RSP and RIF savings to kind of bridge that income gap. So the short answer is yes, most Canadians can actually afford this just from their RSP savings. But the massive middle is just not taking advantage of this incredible opportunity. In fact, 9 out of 10 claim by age 65, even when many are still not working and don't yet need the money. So they're basically choosing a smaller DB pension when they actually need a larger one, often without realizing what they're giving up. According to ESDCs, so they're the biggest federal department and largely responsible for the design in some ways of the CPP. According to their large-scale internal evaluation, not only do many Canadians misunderstand this decision, not only do they not know, they found through their focus groups, people don't even know that they don't know. So it's kind of the worst type of not knowing. You don't even know that you don't know it. And to put this in perspective, the average Canadian is actually typically giving up about $100,000 in lifetime income by taking CPP at age 60 instead of age 70. Now, $100,000, sometimes when I talk about this, may not seem like a fortune to some people, but here's the context. The median RSP savings in Canada is actually $100,000 at retirement. So this decision, when to claim CPP, can on average double typical retirement savings while also reducing somebody's financial risk. So that's really crazy. More money, less risk, exactly what the massive middle wants and what we know they're going to need. And it's more than just money. It's also about mitigating financial fears. The top two retirement financial fears, according to our NIA survey, are inflation and running out of money. And delaying CPP and QPP and OAS is actually the only option most retirees have that will directly protect them from both of these two risks. And beyond that, research shows something really fascinating. When people receive income in retirement from a secure pension, instead of drawing down the income from a savings account, they are happier, they are healthier, they're more confident to spend their money. Yes, they're more confident to spend and enjoy the money, and they're more protected from financial abuse. So these effects have enormous social and economic benefit, including less reliance on government programs. Again, all at no taxpayer costs. So to summarize, the CPP QPP claiming decision, it's not just another retirement choice. For the massive middle, it's likely the single most important retirement financial decision they are ever going to make. It can literally mean the difference between doubling the income they say is essential while reducing their top financial stresses, which are inflation, running out of money, and increasing long-term stability and well-being for their families. So about 8 years ago, I began this massive research program just to understand why Canadians were not claiming this option. Given all the talk we have around proven retirement financial security, the pension crisis, baby boomers at risk, why are people not using this incredible opportunity to improve their financial security? And I basically want to understand why, but also to find realistic solutions that actually can meaningfully help people make more informed, unbiased decisions that will better serve them. So this research over the past 8 years, we synthesized hundreds of academic studies from around the world. We consulted hundreds of experts, economists, behavioral scientists, actuaries, and government officials. And of course, it was a very complicated topic. I started off thinking I could do it in one paper. One paper became two. Two papers became ultimately 10. We presented massive amounts of communication, suggestions, and tool that could be actually voluntarily implemented by financial advisors, employers, and by Service Canada that would support more informed decision making for claiming CPP and QPP pensions. But after all that work, one truth became clear. Even if we fix all the communication tools and advisor practices, it still won't be enough. And that's because research consistently shows that education alone, even good in education, it informs, it helps people to understand, but it doesn't do a whole lot in terms of helping people to change their behavior. Because people don't often make decisions the way that actuaries and economists think they do. They make them often by feelings and habits and biases. And because of that, the reality is effective policy solutions don't try to change people through information campaigns. They try to align with how people actually think, behave, and decide. So by the end of that massive research journey, the conclusion was crystal clear. We needed to move beyond communications and fix the underlying issue at its source. So in our final paper by Barbara, Doug, and I, we published it last December with the NIA, of course. This was the turning point. We identified that source of the problem and the legislative change that could solve it. So now everyone's asking the million-dollar question, what's actually holding people back? Again, we're not talking about, people get confused here. We're not talking about low-income people here. We're talking about the massive middle. The bottom third should and do claim their pensions at 60. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the people who are still working, can afford to delay, who rely only on CPP and OAS. They do not have a workplace pension that will provide them that retirement income security they say that they want, and study after study say they need. The question is, what is holding them back from this great opportunity? So we found the answer buried in large-scale surveys and focus groups from federal governments had run, and we also confirmed it through a wealth of international research and market experience. And here it is. Here's the punchline. Among those who can afford to delay, the most common reason for claiming early isn't financial need. It's fear. Fear of dying early and losing out on benefits. So to the human mind, CPP and QPP claiming actually feels like a gamble with death. Basically, people have this short-term fear. What if I die and miss out? And that overrides the much bigger long-term risk of running out of money later on. And because of that short-term fear, people make decisions that do not line up with their long-term interests. So once I understood that, the solution came to me after a lot of research and through really countless conversations again with thought leaders around the world, and it was reinforced by academic evidence and by proven practices in the private annuity and pension markets. So if people see CPP, QPP as a gamble, the solution has to make it feel like a sure thing. The solution is the pension delay guarantee or the PDG. It's a simple, elegant intervention that flips the psychology on its head. It directly targets the fear of losing out by guaranteeing that if somebody delays claiming and dies early, their estate, they don't lose out on those payments. So this is how it works very simply. If someone delays claiming their CPP and they die before reaching their break-even point, the age when the higher delayed benefits would catch up with the earlier ones, the PDG basically pays out the difference between what they actually received and what they could have received had they started at age 60. So basically what this means is people will never get less than what they would have gotten if they claimed at age 60. So, for example, now let's consider somebody who has a choice between a pension of $1,000 a month starting at age 65 or a pension of $640 starting at 60 because it's 36% less. Now, if they delay claiming and died at age 63, so can you imagine they do not claim it at 60, they go along and then they die at 63 quite early. They would actually, and they haven't started their pension, the PDG would pay their estate the 3 years of payments they missed out on. If they start their pension at age 65 and died age 67, the $1,000 pension they collected in those 2 years between 65 and 67, it's still less than the years they missed out on since the age of 60. And the PDG again would pay you out the difference. Now, by the time people hit 74, they've now collected. If they started at 65 and by the time they get to 74, they've now collected more than they would have gotten had they started at age 60. So if they were to die at 74, there'd be no payment because, again, they've broken even. Now, the numbers are all in the brief that we'll be sharing in the chat, and it's on our website. But in plain language, the way you'd explain this to your mom is that the PDG will basically guarantee her that if she dies early, she'll get at least what she would have gotten by starting at age 60. So the early claiming, driven by this kind of short fear of loss, it's not in any of our actuarial calculations. It is not the way actuaries and economists see the world. And as Doug Chandler always explains to other actuaries, even though this is not the way actuaries see things and the way pensions act, this is how people make this financial decision when discussing it at their kitchen table. And our job is to make the CPP and the QPP systems work the best for them, have the best pension outcomes for them. They fundamentally believe that by delaying, dying, and losing those payments, that is not fair. Even if it's unlikely, that feeling of unfairness and sense of potential loss is actually driving their behavior. And the PDG solves this. It basically removes the mental gamble. It acts like an insurance. So people will stop thinking, what if I die soon? How much would I lose? And they can actually start asking the much more productive and more responsible and prudent decision when it comes to financing your retirement. I've got nothing to lose by waiting. How much could I gain? What could this do for me? Not just 10 years from now, but 20 and 30 years from now. So basically, by taking the fear off the kitchen table, retirees can make decisions that truly fit their circumstances now and 30 years from now. Now, again, we could try to fight this short-term, short-sighted loss aversion impulse through education, but that's a losing battle. Decades of research and real-world market experience tell us that education, again, won't beat this. This is why, again, for the actuaries out there, pure life-only annuities are fictitious. They only appear in actuarial textbooks. People need term certains. They need guarantees or they don't buy them. Whether it's though annuities, workplace pensions, or personal savings, people's decisions are driven often by this short-term loss aversion. So instead of fighting it, the PDG solution neutralizes it. It removes the perceived downside so people can focus on the upside. So again, how do we know this is going to work? Well, like I mentioned, annuity markets, pension plan designs, and similar reforms in other countries have shown the effectiveness of having this type of money back guarantee in incentivizing people to voluntarily shift from choosing money now to choosing a lifelong retirement income. And Bernick Van Wyck from Australian Retirement Trust, this is none other but the world's largest defined contribution pension plan. He put it perfectly. After years and millions of dollars of research leading to their very successful award-winning lifetime pension product, he said, it's true, it's not actuarially optimal, but the introduction of a death benefit was the only inefficient feature in our product, but without it, nobody would buy it. People do not like a one-way bet on their life. And that's exactly the point. As Bernick explained, the guarantee replaces fear with confidence. And that's what allows people to make better long-term decisions. And here's another beautiful thing about the solution. It's psychologically powerful, but financially inexpensive. Only a small minority of people actually die before break even. So payouts would be rare and the overall cost very small. So it's a low cost. And according to our calculations, which would of course be confirmed by the chief actuary, the PDG could actually be self-financed by being integrated directly into CPP's existing age adjustment factors, making it self-funded with only a negligible impact on benefit levels. So to explain how this would work, basically the age 60 benefit would not be changed. This is critical because people in poor health or lower income and those who face the GIS clawbacks, they need flexibility. They need to keep that pension at its current level for that, and that vulnerable group, it's really essential. Now, the way that it could be funded, the longer the delay, the higher the adjustment and the higher the guarantee is. But here's the interesting part. Even at the maximum cost, which would be at age 70, that's the most, if someone delayed all the way to age 70, the PDG would be at its highest value. Barbara and Doug ran the numbers and found that the cost would literally be pennies on the dollar. According to their numbers, waiting from age 60 to age 70 currently increases, like I already mentioned earlier in the presentation, it basically doubles your pension, 222%. If you put in the PDG, that would only drop to about 214%. So it's very inexpensive. And the other option is that if the chief actuary determines there to be a surplus during her actual evaluation this year, then the PDG could be directly funded from there. And this is an excellent use of the surplus because it does provide a powerful opportunity to directly improve retirement pension replacement rate outcomes of the CPP. So basically, this type of solution will immediately strengthen the CPP's financial outcomes in terms of the pension income adequacy it delivers. So whenever we have solutions, we say the winners, we talked about that. Now we're going to talk about the losers. Who would not like this solution? Well, the only losers would be those who, number one, who don't want the protection. They claim at the same age. It doesn't change their behavior. They're not going to get a higher pension. They're going to claim at the same age. And they live long past the break even. So they don't make use of this. So meaning they've effectively paid for an insurance they never used. But even then, we need to remember that those who live the longest are usually the higher income Canadians, and they already benefit the most from the CPP and QPP. And in fact, two academics, Tammy Sherrill and Kevin Milligan, found that between the lowest income to the highest income in the CPP, you could have people living 10 years on average difference. So that means 10 years of extra pension coverage by those higher earners. Meanwhile, on the other hand, believe it or not, it's actually the lower income groups who would benefit potentially the most from this guarantee. And that's because they have the lower life expectancies. I'll just give a quick example of why it actually is more equitable. If you take two 65-year-old men, imagine they're the exact same situation. They both rely only on CPP and OAS. They don't have a workplace pension. The only difference between them is that they're from different income groups. For both, the PDG pays out if death occurs before age 73. But for the higher earner, because he's a higher earner, he has a lower chance of dying, and therefore he only actually has a 10% chance of benefiting from this guarantee. On the other hand, the lower earner, who would be at the 40th percentile, so the bottom of the massive middle, he actually has a 15% chance. So that's 50% higher. That means that the PDG basically has a 50% higher value to the lower income 65-year-old. So what that means is that it's actually improving equity within the CPP system. But just to be clear, that's great. We definitely don't want to go in the other direction. But equity, improving equity is actually not even the purpose. It's more of a side benefit of the PDG. The real point is actually to improve retirement income adequacy and security for the vulnerable mass and middle, the group most at risk and large enough to define Canada's economic future. And from a social policy perspective, we have to realize this is not about fine-tuning or tinkering with the system. It's about addressing a very real, very large retirement income crisis that's just starting to unfold. And so, as I give this other information about the benefits, we really need to be laser focused on helping to avert what's coming. So I want to return again quickly to the social policy objective. And that is this. We have a quarter of our population, the baby boomers. They are now moving into retirement. And within that, there's the massive middle, those with modest savings and no workplace pensions. And they are the group most at risk of retirement income inadequacy over the next several decades. They're not poor. They're not in a crisis yet, but they're very exposed. They have some health and wealth and time to act. But again, there's no viable and effective solution on the table that is going to help them close this gap, except this option to delay the CPP and QPP. Now, the CPP enhancement was actually designed directly to help this group. Unfortunately, though, it's not going to mature for 40 years, and this is far too late for today's retirees. Other solutions could be raising, the OAS age or increasing taxes, but neither of these options really have a lot of political support. But delaying CPP can actually help this group directly and tremendously. It's powerful, it's immediate, it's already built in. But please keep in mind, for the massive middle, this isn't actually pocket change. It's very effective. It can actually transform the retirement financial picture. So again, I said at the beginning of the presentation, if people have typically about $20,000 in pension income, if they delay from 60 to 70, that 10,000 from CPP goes to 20,000. So now they're going to get not just 20,000 of retirement income, they're going to get 30,000 per year for life. That's life-changing for anyone. To explain in another way, if people were to delay just by 3 years, from age 60 to 63, it actually has the same impact as the entire CPP enhancements. And for those of you who weren't involved in that, the CPP enhancements actually took 40 years to legislate, and it again will take another 40 years to phase in. Now, on the other hand, introducing the PDG so that actually encourages better claiming behavior, that would be immediate. Now, of course, some people will wait more than just 3 years. They could wait 5 years and their pensions will go up 56%. And as I already said, if they waited all the way to 70, they would more than double this pension. Now, in addition to be very effective, leveraging the delay option to improve retirement income outcomes, it's also viable because it's making the most of our existing retirement infrastructure. We don't have to raise taxes. We don't have to change the system more fully. We don't need more contributions. And it's also fair. It's a very efficient use. It's a smart solution. It's using the funds we have more efficiently to encourage self-financing retirement. Again, this improves intergenerational equity, it relieves pressure on retirees' adult children, and on the public purse. So this is an enormous opportunity, one of the most effective fares and immediate tools we have, yet again, millions of Canadians simply aren't using it because of one small but very powerful psychological bias. The PDG would fix that. It would remove the fear so people can again focus on that opportunity. It's not about changing the system. It's a simple, low-cost, proven improvement that helps people to help themselves. And that's really key. This is not a mandated change. We're not mandating behavior. The PDG actually enables people to keep choice, but it makes it easier for people to make the right choice while also giving them feeling of a win-win situation of the additional guarantee. So it's a direct design improvement that works within human psychology rather than against it. And that's the power of behaviorally smart policy designs. So to quickly recap the advantages of the PDG, from the individual's perspective, it reduces loss aversion. It helps them make better, more confident, informed, long-term decisions. It takes fear off the table and replaces it with confidence. It actually aligns with what retirement is really about, lifelong income security, and it also supports better financial, physical, and mental well-being as people age. From the government's perspective, it helps prevent the coming pension crisis among baby boomers, vulnerable massive middle, which is projected again to be a third of our older population. They're not there yet, but it's happening. It's going to enhance both perceived and actual fairness within the CPP and QPP designs, and it improves retirement financial health. Retirement financial health and well-being outcomes at no taxpayer costs. And finally, and very importantly, it protects the social infrastructure of Canada as we become a super aged nation. This is an incredibly rare combination of advantages, and that's why this idea has been met with such enthusiasm among stakeholders. When we released this research, the response was extraordinary, both in the media and among experts across the country. So we had a ton of media, but I'm showing this to you right now because it's more than actually the media. The media attention tells us something very important, and that's just how important this topic is to Canadians. It resonates with so many people because we have so many people going into retirement who are facing this important decision. So it really affects everybody personally. It's a huge opportunity to prove outcomes quickly and at scale. So, to begin the wrap up, with Canada's aging population, the pension crisis facing the massive middle, we really need a smart, workable solution that serve older Canadians and their families while bending the cost curve for governments. We're already seeing early warning signs. We see pressure to reduce OAS costs. We see strains on healthcare budgets of the provinces. But we should realize we're only at the tip of the iceberg. We have a demographic shift coming where our 85-year-old plus population is going to triple in the coming decade. The good news is we can actually help Canadians enjoy happier, healthier, and more financially secure retirements by supporting better, more informed CPP and QPP claiming decisions. The bad news is that its age is time sensitive. So I just want to share that we've actually received an incredible amount of support by those who care deeply about retirement financial security in Canada. As mentioned, we already have been invited to present this to the federal, provincial, and territorial officials responsible for the CPP. And the PDG has earned endorsements from influential voices across Canada, from financial experts like Rob Carrick, esteemed public servants like Mel Cap, and leading pension thinkers like Keith Ambasher, from John Stapleton and Richard Shillington. These are considered kind of Canada's leading policy experts on protecting the interests of low-income older Canadians. Now, of course, we have these remarkable individuals, but we are also seeing strong support from Canada's most respected industry and advocacy organizations for older adults like ACPM, CanAge, Observatoire de la Retraite, HelpAge, major Canadian pension plans, and many, many others. And so we're now preparing a collective endorsement letter to Minister Champagne and Hajdu that really will just help to bring these voices together. This is really, this whole initiative, I would say, is coming from a place of passion and goodwill. And we're trying to just, bring those voices together who agree that this is exactly the kind of practical innovation that Canada needs right now. And we are now opening the floodgates during this presentation to say if you would like to join, please, go in that code or go to the link and you can sign up and please add your signature by December 16th. So going back to the time urgency of doing this quickly is that we actually have 20 million Canadians contributing to the CPP and QPP, and every single day, more than 1,000 of them are making this decision when to start their benefits. The last and largest wave of baby boomers have just turned 60 and they're now eligible to claim. Between 2025 and 2030, more than 2.3 million will apply for retirement benefits. But the vulnerable massive middle, the group without the workplace plans and without savings, significant savings, they're not taking advantage of this golden opportunity. And that's dangerous because, again, their choices will shape Canada's fiscal and social stability for decades to come. The pressures are visible already, and they're only going to intensify going forward. Now, thankfully, the pension delay guarantee, it's powerful, it's practical, it's a proven solution, it's self-financed, it's equitable, it's a reform that really policymakers across the political spectrum and stakeholders, as I've just shown, can really rally behind, and they are. It's addressing real and perceived fairness, and it enables Canadians to make better decisions, not by mandate, but by design. And again, as we said, it will protect the social infrastructure of Canada as it ages. But as I said, the clock is ticking. The next CPP triennial review is in 2026, so next year. If policymakers can act within this cycle, the PDG could actually be implemented as early as January 1st, 2028, or even earlier. But if not, the next window wouldn't come until 2031, by which time most baby boomers have already claimed. This is why speed matters. This is why it's so important to come together quickly. Acting now could mean reforms. Basically, it can take effect while millions of Canadians still have kind of the health and the resources, and also before they've actually made this really important lifelong decision. So again, in case people missed it, here's the slide again. And I just want to close with like a personal note. Again, many of us are fortunate enough to belong to a workplace defined benefit pension plan, but realize again, we are the exception. The vulnerable massive middle, they don't have the security. And so we really do need to put ourselves oftentimes in their shoes and ensure that they too can age with dignity and confidence and stability. And now I'm going to say kind of the most important point of this entire presentation. Canada's CPP, most of us came into it as it is, but it's one of the most sustainable social security systems in the world. And that's not by accident. That's because 30 years ago, in the 1990s, a group of policy heroes from government, industry, and public, and they all came together. And those people, they looked 30 years ahead and they saw what was coming. And they acted boldly out of a sense of responsibility to future generations. And today we're reaping the rewards of that foresight. Because of them, Canada has a $700 billion fund and a world-class social security system that I can tell from personal experience, it's admired all around the world. We are having this fund when we will need it the most. And that's because that group that met in the 1990s, in my mind, they're really heroes in every sense of the word. But now it's our turn. The challenges over the next 30 years, they're just as clear as those that the 1990s heroes faced. We have the tools, we have the research, but we have a narrow but critical window to act. But just like them, by acting now, we can improve the lives of millions of retirees, their families, and Canadian society, not just today, but decades to come. If we delay, that opportunity will close. But if we act and we move with the same vision and courage as those who came before us, Canadians will look back on 2025 as the year that heroes again came together to strengthen the CPP with a smart, small, transformative change, one that helped build Canada's social and economic resilience for the coming decades ahead. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. I'm now going to close the slides and I'm going to invite Barbara and Doug to join me on stage to do some of the Q&A.
Thank you, Bonnie Jean. That was fantastic. We have a lot of really great questions already in the Q&A. This is just another reminder. If you have any questions based on what you heard, please post them in the Q&A, not in the chat. So if it goes in the chat, we'll probably ask you to move it over to the Q&A segment where we can see it then. Because we have so many questions, I want to group them a little bit by theme. And the first theme of questions came in early during the presentation, perhaps before you got to some of the explanations of why people delay. But this is a number of questions are driving at people's reasons for delaying. So maybe it's worth rehashing a little bit. There was a question saying, do most people take it early because they do not believe in the financial management of the fund? Actually, let me just read out the question word for word. Do you think that most people take it early since they do not believe in the financial management of the fund, as well as it's only funded for the next 70 years? Is that a major reason?
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take a stab at that, and then Doug can take it. So again, we did a very, very long deep dive into all these reasons and understanding perceptions, And basically, what happened, I mentioned those policy heroes in the 1990s who basically saw that the CPP was going to be in financial trouble. They started a campaign to say we need to actually increase contributions to create this separate fund so that the CPP was sustainable. Now, there's some evidence that maybe some of those ideas didn't die hard even when the change was made. So some people still kind of has this lingering idea that the CPP is not sustainable, but as Doug and I kind of say, there's nothing in life that's secure. There's no pension promise that's 100%, but CPP is probably the most strongest part of our entire retirement income system, and that's because it's funded. It actually has a $700 billion fund being held independently to ensure that the promises made are actually going to be kept over the next 75 years. So the question is, yes, of course, it's very secure. It's probably one of the most secure parts of our system. Um, Whether people are not claiming because of fear of that lack of security, that does come up, but overall, based on the focus groups and when the questions are asked, it doesn't really become a high one. Like I said, for people who can afford to delay by far, and this is not just research in Canada, that was also done by very sophisticated studies in the US and focus groups, again, that showed that people are really worried that if they delay, they're not going to live long enough to break even. Doug, did you want to add anything to that?
Just to reinforce it, um, I suspect there are some people responsible for funded pension plans, and another day I could argue my case that CPP is actually safer than than a pot of money or a funded plan because of the governance structures and because of the multiple backstops in the way it's secured. But that doesn't help the discussion at the kitchen table. I think part of what's going on is the big push that went on in the 90s to convince people they needed to pay more for CPP to make it safe. And that started by saying it's not safe the way it is. And people somehow haven't forgotten. Another part of this is the news that leaks over from the United States, where their Social Security is still funded the way CPP was funded from 1965 to 1995. And it's too big to change. And it is headed towards a problem a decade or so from now that they're going to have to do something. So sustainability really is an issue in the United States, and I think people hear about that a lot.
Thank you, Doug and Bonnie Jean. So then in a related question, this is also not a matter of choosing between instant gratification and later money later. There was a related question that says, what about the tendency to choose instant gratification? I want money now so I can spend it versus long-term planning. Is that a factor for people in the massive middle? Or again, was that less of a concern than this fear?
So the people who need the money now to spend the money to cover their taxes or sorry, their rent and their basic expenses, for those people, and those are usually the same people who will be drawing GIS, absolutely they should be claiming early. Now, for the people who are choosing whether or not they can delay their CPP, the question becomes, should I self-finance that delay period either by working longer or by drawing from my savings? So for those people, they could still spend more now. They just need to draw more from their RSP money now. So it's not really a question about how much I want to spend now. It's more of a question between this balance between how much money do I want in my RSPs as accessible savings, and how much do I want in pension income and what's going to give me sometimes the bigger bang for the buck. And what I can say, and I think there's another question there about, considering taxes and everything, all things considered, one study that I ran, we used actually a very sophisticated microsimulation model that had stochastic investments and taxes and mortality. And we found that basically not only do people, if someone were to use their RSP money and bridge the CPP delay, 8 out of 10 times they would actually do better by delaying CPP just because it's such a good financial option. So basically, delaying CPP for people, if you were to do kind of that financial trade-off, and that's after taxes and everything else, it actually has higher expected returns and lower risk. So that's exactly what you never hear. Higher risk means less reward. But in fact, if you run the numbers, you actually will get less financial risk and more reward by using your RSPs to bridge the income delay of CPP.
We usually frame this exactly the way Bonnie Jean described it, RRSP versus CPP. Because for the vulnerable massive middle, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about changing their lifestyle. They're talking about which to draw first. And in that framing and in that situation, tax effects don't matter. Having said that, if you're responsible for advising people either through an employer plan or as a personal financial planner, absolutely you have to think about taxes in some other situations where it's not simply a choice between an RSP and Canada Pension Plan.
Right. But I think the
Thank
point
you.
there is, yeah, the registered savings incur the same, income tax, same eligibility for income tested benefits. So the apples to apples comparisons does show that, choosing the RSPs to delay your CPP, it's the better option.
So there were a lot of questions about that precisely, various variants in the Q&A about is this if you take this into account or that into account, is this a better choice? A key question though is, are financial advisors behind this on board? And when this question was posted, we haven't really been talking about the PDG just the delay. So maybe you can address this in two components. Are financial advisor on board with delaying CPP as a good option for most people? And then the second part of the question, are financial advisors on board with the PDG proposal?
Yeah, I think the short answer is that financial advisors play a critical role. Uh, Sometimes in closed rooms, you hear concern there could be conflicts of interest because if a financial advisor is managing someone's RSP and that person can delay their take their CPP earlier, that's actually adding more money to management. So that individual would then be receive management fees and bonuses and all those things that come with managing more fees. However, what's interesting is that since the research began, I did not find that to be the case. I think there's, obviously bad actors in every profession, but every financial advisor I spoke to said that, yeah, my they just want to take it early. They think they're going to die early. I try to tell them they're not going to. It's unlikely. And again, when we were been talking to people we really respect in the financial advisor community, uh, the answer is unanimous that if there was this kind of backstop, their job is going to be made so much easier in helping people actually make better long-term decisions.
I agree. There's no evidence of that the industry as a whole is biased in that way. But financial advisors have their own problems and their own biases. I remember talking to one who told me that telling people to delay is sort of no win. If they happen to die early, the beneficiaries are going to be mad at them. There's nobody who's going to be who's the only people who are going to be happy with them are the people who are still alive when they're 95 years old, and that's a long time. That's 30 years to wait. They won't be the financial advisor anymore. The relationship doesn't last that long. So they have some other problems with this in terms of keeping their clients happy, but I wouldn't call it a conflict of interest issue. I would say that it's dealing with the psychological biases, the same as we've been talking about.
Thank you for those. Question about the implementation quickly before we maybe jump into some of the other ones. Would the PDG require the 2/3 majority of the provinces to agree to it?
The short answer is yes. That is why we did the presentation with the government officials last month, and that was exactly the group we were talking to. So that's the process. That's the process we're headed down.
Thank you. And you mentioned that the cost of the PDG itself is not significant, right? But the idea is that by adding this, it will actually change behavior, and more people will delay. There's a host of questions from different people in the Q&A about what will that do to the sustainability of the CPP itself. In other words, if a lot of people delay to 70, will that actually make things worse for the CPP at large? Or is this not really an issue because of the actuarial adjustment factors?
I'll take that one first, Brian Jean. You can add after. The principle behind the age adjustment factors in Canada Pension Plan is that they should be actuarially neutral. Or, in other words, if everyone took their pension at age 61 instead of age 65, the minimum contribution rate required of employers and employees would be the same. That's That's a little different. It's a little different than the concept you'd see in a private pension plan, where we see actuarially equivalent commuted values or actuarially neutral early retirement factors, because when they do it, they take account of um, the changes that will happen in the person's career average earnings should they delay. There's the dropout provisions and that sort of thing, and the contributions that would be coming in after somebody had already maxed out on their benefit if they delay. So it's a different calculation than you would see in the private sector, but the principle is the same, that it should be neutral. And although there's a cost to the pension delay guarantee at age 65, we would anticipate that the age adjustment factors, which are being recalculated now in this cycle, would take it into account. And the fact that the pension delay guarantee is a lot more expensive for somebody who claims at age 70 and free for somebody who claims at age 60 would be part of that calculation. The provinces and the chief actuary have a big puzzle. They only review those age adjustment factors once every third valuation, once every 9 years. And so that's why this is so timely right now, is they're doing it. And they're dealing with 9 years worth of improvements in life expectancy. They're dealing with the funded additional benefits that were adopted a few years ago that have different actuarial characteristics because they depend more on expected return on investments and less on real wage gains and that sort of thing. And they're dealing with the new post-retirement benefits. So they've got some puzzles, and in the end, they're going to have to bring all those factors into account to come up with truly neutral contribution rates or various ages, and probably do some things to simplify the fact that it's a different problem at different ages.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, so there's a lot of considerations, and this is why we did our numbers. We know it's a low cost because we know whether it's introduced in annuities or in Australia. That's what we've been told by pension plans, by the private annuity market, that when you introduce these kind of death benefits, because the probability of dying within those 10 years is low, the cost is very low. So we already know that as a concept. Now, precisely kind of, the decimal impacts, that's something that only the chief actuary can figure out. What I would like to add, and Doug makes this point really beautifully, and I'll quote you, Doug, is that right now, when people are choosing whether they're going to, claim it at 61 or 70, they're basically making a gamble with their death. So guess what? The people who think they're going to live the longest, they're the ones who are delaying. The people who think they're going to live the shortest, they're the ones who are claiming early. Now, this is when you have this is called a moral risk in a system. Basically, people who know they're going to get the most benefit from an insurance, they're the ones making the decision to actually take most advantage of an opportunity, and that actually drives up the cost. Now, the cool thing about these kind of death benefits, they actually take out the moral hazard. So now people who you don't have to guess how long you're going to live. You can delay and still get the protection if you do die early. And therefore, by improving kind of the life expectancy, longevity expectations, you can actually reduce some of the costs in the CPP as well. So there's a lot of factors again, but I think that's kind of an interesting point that especially people outside the actual world don't realize, that when you introduce these kind of death benefits, it actually creates a fairer playing ground for everybody, including the more vulnerable groups.
It's true. The reducing anti-selection should make this a cheaper option than it would appear to an actuary just doing the arithmetic with the factors that we have and the mortality rates that we have. But that's really not the point. The point is, we don't want people betting against the actuary, making the decision based on whether or not the actuary has the right mortality table for them and how long they're going to live. We want them making the decision based on how much lifetime income they need, as opposed to how much they need in flexible spending buckets that they can spend as they need it. This whole question of, do you need more paycheck or do you need more nest egg? And that's the deferring CPP is the best opportunity people will have to rebalance between paycheck and nest egg, or between guaranteed lifetime monthly income and flexible spending. And that's what we see as being the need that can be addressed through timing of claiming of CPP, and that's where we want people to be able to focus. The pension delay guarantee takes away the thing that prevents them focusing on what's really their issue.
And so you're mentioning that the cost is actually minimal because the actual likelihood, like people fear an event and act based on that fear, but the actual likelihood of that fear coming true is very, very small. So people dying and needing to claim or receiving the pension delay guarantee is actually very small, which makes it actually a rather inexpensive thing to provide. And there's a point made in the Q&A. It's perhaps less of a question than an observation, but it's important that there's justifiably a focus on the economic outlook and opportunities for younger Canadians these days. And so getting something like this PDG adopted, which the person supports, might require a clearer demonstration. This is not just another handout to boomers, while younger Canadians struggle to find jobs, attain home ownership, and even get food on the table for their families. In other words, can you confirm that this is in fact helping more than just the group that is perceived to have already received a lot?
Yeah, so that's where I'll happily get on my soapbox. So I think we need to realize that baby boomers are in this beautiful position right now. They have health and they have wealth. In 10, 20 years, they may not have those things anymore. And if they don't have those things, they're actually going to fall more heavily onto the system. And then people, not only is it going to put pressure on our healthcare systems, if your parent is in need, you're going to feel a pressure to actually take care of them financially. Maybe it means that you have to leave the workforce. And during COVID, we kind of got a little sneak peek of what that could look like, where people really felt like they had to, leave their jobs to help support their parents for whatever reasons during the epidemic. But all is to say is that if we can actually come up with smart solutions now that actually tap into that wealth and make it work more smartly and effectively and efficiently, to produce a more secure long-term income for Canada's aging population, that automated income is going to take so much pressure off of everybody in 10, 20 years. And again, this is not chump change. If somebody can delay, they're literally doubling their CPP. It's massive. And the other point that we often don't, in the financial world, we often really look at the financial numbers, and we've done all those numbers, we've done all the number crunching. But I just want to kind of point out there's a lot of other advantages that anyone who's had an aging relative and they had to actually start managing their estate and decide how to draw down the savings, that's really stressful on families, and it can create division and other problems. So again, oftentimes when older adults have a secure automated pension income, it really takes the pressure even off the most well-meaning families to support that older adult as they get older, because as they encounter cognitive declines, what long-term residence should mom and dad go to. All those questions are a lot easier to answer when they have a monthly budget. But when they don't have a monthly budget, you don't know how long they need to be in those places. You see a nest egg, you see $100,000 in the bank, you don't know how long it's going to last. So uh, there's so many reasons why improving retirement income security for aging Canadians is just so valuable. Again, not just for the financial reasons, but also for the social reasons as well. And Doug, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, not to that one.
Thank you. And really, you've made a very clear case in terms of the income who this will serve, right? It's that massive middle with it between the 30th and 85th percentile of the income distribution. So not people with really low incomes and not people who are able to self-insure and look after themselves. However, in terms of the ages, I think people still are a little bit unclear who are the people that this will really, really serve? I mean, in some ways, those who will benefit from the full enhanced CPP, when it becomes mature 40 years from now, those are somewhat looked after. But and then there's already people who are already at age 61 and are making these decisions now. So who are really the people that this decision or the PDG would help making their decisions?
Yeah, so basically the group we're targeting is really the front and center is the baby boomers moving into retirement. Again, this is not a handout. This would actually be funded from within the system. So there would be no extra cost to taxpayers or to contributions on your payroll tab. The idea here is make the system smarter. And so right now we have our biggest population in Canadian history moving into retirement, and it's those people we want to catch. They have not spent a lifetime in workplace pensions. They've only maybe saved, $100,000 perhaps or less. And how can we help them to bridge them to just more retirement income security? So that's the group we want to, help in the short term. But this kind of solution, it'll be good forever. It'll give more flexibility to people to make this decision that serves their long-term interests. Again, instead of serving this short-term psychological bias, which is really what's driving these decisions right now.
To be fair, we've already missed the front end of the baby boom, but there are a lot more coming in the years ahead. Part of the transition will be, I'm not sure if this has come up elsewhere, but if somebody has already started their CPP, they can change their mind within the first few months, or I think up to 11 months afterwards. So if they get caught up in the transition, there is an obvious solution to allow people who suddenly realize, oh, I wouldn't have claimed early.
Thank you. It's so the question was really about the fact that depending on how you would draw the end of the baby boom, they could be 61 today, in which case, by the time these come in, it might be a little bit too late. But this would also work for people who are in their 50s right now and contemplating things, right?
Yeah,
Who
it
are
would.
I'm gonna assert myself that is not the baby boomers, but
Barbara,
there's still a group,
we're
an
only 30.
important group. That's right. We're only 30. Um, so if the PDG were put in place and achieves the change in behavior in terms of more people delaying again, there has been talk of government policy of potentially raising the CPP starting age from 60 or the CPP age from 65 to 67. Would that then stop that policy or stop the need for that policy?
Yeah, so if you want to get um, riots in the street, change the minimum pension age of a social security program. I mean, we saw this in France. Mandating changes like this don't work. People feel like they've lost something, even when the intentions are good. So again, it's all about working within people's psychology, keeping flexibility and choice. And this is why we actually have a whole little section about, the dangers of trying to mandate changes like that, forcing everybody up 2 years. It can really backfire. And also, it's only moving people by 2 years. A solution like ours, it may not only moves people from claiming from age 60 to 62, it may encourage people to actually really make the most out of the CPP and claim all the way to age 70 and really augment their pensions. So again, uh, behavioral economics has um, unquestionably shown the power of these type of benefits, and mandating changes, unfortunately, will not get received well, usually by the public.
Quebec did actually entertain moving the age range from instead of 60 to 70, making it 62 to 72. And there was no problem with moving the top age up to 72, but they had to back off on the idea of moving the bottom age from 60 to 62, even though there was really no change in value involved in that.
Yeah, and I would
Um,
also add that the point is too is that people have a very different circumstances, and we can't put everyone in a box. There's a lot of people who retire at 60 because they have to. They are taking care of somebody, and they still serve a very important social, benefit, or they're sick themselves, whatever the reason may be. Some people need to retire early, and that's why we actually introduced originally, believe it or not, you had to take your CPP at 65 when it was originally introduced, and then they introduced this. In the 80s, this option to claim it all the way down to age 60. And that flexibility has actually done great work in reducing poverty among older Canadians because it helps people earlier on to bridge out of the workforce if they need to, without having that threat of income insecurity, basically.
this may be obvious when I say it, but it's often overlooked in the discussion. And that is that when you're 59 years old, you don't have to choose between 60 and 70. You only have to choose between 60 and next year. It is something that until you claim, you can revisit the decision every year.
That's a very good point, Doug, and an important one to consider. Uh, you mentioned QPP earlier. There's a question in the Q&A about, is it fair to assume that this recommendation would also apply to QPP, or are there some differences?
There are differences, and QPP is required is um, essentially the same or similar enough to Canada Pension Plan, but there are differences in the way they apply post-retirement benefits and actuarial adjustment factors. I mentioned one of them already. So they wouldn't be obliged to replicate this exactly.
Right. So if CPP does it,
Yeah.
QPP doesn't have to copy it. Whether or not it's valuable to the QPP, I think the answer is yes. In fact, QPP was having even higher claiming ages of people still working at age 60 than the CPP. So they were a bit more assertive in trying to tackle this question. Why are people claiming so early when they clearly can afford to wait? They're not financially vulnerable and they're still working full time. What's going on here? So they've already actually, I think, started doing some fantastic improvements to their communications and other improvements to kind of help to solve this problem again through the communications route. But for the QPP, just like the CPP, just like any pension plan, having this guarantee is really going to make a significant impact on getting people to optimize their behavior even further.
And they are getting results. And we're not saying that changing communication is irrelevant. It is relevant, and Quebec has shown that to us. It's just that it's not the silver bullet that we think the pension delay guarantee is.
A related question then, I'm going to again bundle up a few more questions because they are on the similar theme. What do we know about potential take-up rates? I mean, I guess all three of us are actuaries, so our job is often to look into the future, but we do not have a crystal ball. What's our best guess? Do we have any idea of what the take-up rate on the PDG might be? And relatedly, the chief actuary in costing this will actually have to make some assumptions about potential take-up rates. Possibly has the NIA been involved in helping the chief actuary with those assumptions?
No, we're not helping, but again, yes. So the answer is yes, you need to make some assumptions about take-up rates to understand full costs. But the idea, of course, as Doug already mentioned, it should be actuarially neutral. And for those of you who don't know what that means that the cost of the pension plan is the same, whether or not you take it at 60 or 70. That's the theory. But sometimes once you actually put all these numbers and variables and the way the chief actuary does these projections and calculations, it's including things like demographics and working force, things that in the private pension world we don't really deal so much with. So there's a lot of things, and no, she'll be doing that. We're always here available, of course, but she's definitely the expert on that, and she's got a whole team to do those more nuanced calculations for sure.
We know from evidence in all kinds of different pensions and annuities from all over the world that a death benefit makes a huge difference in people's willingness to take money later instead of money now. We know from a question we included in the National Institute of Aging annual survey that this will make a difference to the people that it's targeted at in their decisions. It's hard to quantify that, but yes, we are satisfied that this will have an impact.
I guess the thing is that we know that 90% of people are taking it by age 65, although the average retirement age is only 65. So most people are taking it while they're still working. And again, a lot of those people, if you ask them, except for the ones who can't afford to delay, they actually say this is the reason why they're not delaying. And I'll also just give a quick anecdotal story. So the reason why this research actually really started for me was that a long time ago, I had friends over, and I was speaking with this long family friend, and he told me he was claiming his CPP at age 60, and that was very surprising to me. And I asked him some more questions, and I was like, "Oh, that's too bad." So basically, he was advised by his accountant to do it, and he wasn't alone. It was basically all the doctors were being told to claim it at age 60, and he wasn't just a doctor; he's a specialist. And his wife didn't have a pension; he had no pension. He's a high earner, and he was still working full time. So he, he didn't need the money. And he was like a professional cyclist. So I thought, oh my gosh, you're going to live to 100. So he was literally like the optimal classic situation of somebody who should really claim it at age 70. And he was claiming at age 60 because he was like, oh, well, if I die. And I thought, oh my gosh, if someone is educated and as him is making this mistake, then what's going on here? So that was kind of the genesis of this. And then
We
I
were
found
asked earlier,
out
yeah,
doctors around Halifax started telling me the same thing. So I don't know what was happening.
we were asked earlier about the tax impact, and the answer at that time was it doesn't matter as long as it's a choice between RSP and CPP. But now we're talking about somebody who's in the top marginal tax bracket and has probably already used up all their RSP room. So all of a sudden, yeah, taxes weigh heavily on this decision.
Yeah, and that's what
I think
a lot of that money was getting taxed away. So
Yeah.
there's a pertinent question to this about we talked about financial advisors and their role in making this decision. What proportion of Canadians actually have access to financial advisors? Do we have an idea?
I think it's a minority, but no, I don't have a statistic offhand. And I think it also depends on what there's people who go privately, there's people who have access to financial advisors through their workplace. They may or may not use it. So I think, yeah, that's not a statistic I have off the top of my head.
And when I think about their business model, I don't see how they get paid for this work.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that, it's really difficult for people to get advice on this really critical decision. And what we found out through our research is that, believe it or not, the number one question people ask when they call into Service Canada is about when I should take my CPP. And Service Canada can't give them an answer. So people are definitely very hungry to understand what they should be doing. And so that's definitely somewhere that the federal government and the provinces could do a bit of a better job in terms of supporting people to understand their pension entitlements and to actually help them to just make more informed decisions for sure.
I wish they were hungrier. We did some survey on work on this a few years ago, and when we asked who did you consult, the most common answer was nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that
That's
was,
an important.
yeah, I forgot about that, Doug. So that was it. Like, just maybe one out of seven basically said they had spent a lot of time on this decision. And again, we had kind of seen that this is probably one of the most important financial decisions somebody will ever make. And yeah, a large group actually said they had consulted nobody and didn't think of anything. They just claimed it. So
There's another question. We talked about a lot about the people who could afford to delay, but they don't. So, this will likely help them reconsider that choice. But there's also a number of people who are probably better off, as you said, taking it early, but introducing the pension delay guarantee might actually make them delay when it's actually not beneficial for them. So, what concurrent measures could you introduce to encourage people who would actually benefit from taking it earlier so that they don't delay, given that incentives are often more powerful than education. So this does happen apparently with lower income Canadians who already often wait until 65 or even later to start their CPP when they actually could be benefiting earlier. Will the PDG, in a sense, make it worse for them? And what concurrent measures could you introduce to mitigate that?
yeah, so I think the way we did talk to some people about this, we asked John Stapleton, who honestly knows more about the plight of lower income Canadians than anyone else that we know, and he didn't think that was actually going to be an issue. The point is, if somebody actually can't afford their bills, they're going to take the money. And I think this concern that maybe they're going to finance the delay, and then there is that kind of penalty of the GIS. It really, I don't see that in the evidence. I think most people who need the money are taking it as soon as they have it available to them. Um, Now, all this to say, there can be, oftentimes we think in extremes, and there are people who are lower income, maybe kind of eligible for GIS, but at the higher of the 30%. And then, things are a little bit less clear for folks in that state. But when we talk to people who really do, again, spend all their time worrying and trying to fix the situation for lower income Canadian older adults, they said that that actual death benefit would be so valuable to those people if they were to pass away. So again, the people kind of on the lower income string who are not so much financial hardship that they have to claim at 60, they again would also be the same ones who would be the most likely to actually receive the PDG. And the for them getting that extra, $20,000, $30,000 is really valuable to them because that can help, cover their funeral costs and lots of other things. So again, the relative value of that money is really important also for people who are more on the lower income spectrum. So there's a lot of considerations, but I don't think people are going to and that's a real failing of the CPP. If people just don't know they have CPP available to them, which was a problem in the past with the GIS, people just didn't know that they were eligible for it, and that's a problem that has to be solved for sure. Um, not, I don't think it's as much a problem for the CPP though, for sure.
There's a related question then about how people know when they can claim, and there's a comment here. You get a letter in the mail when you're 59, which shows you the amounts if you take it at 60 versus 70. Would this letter prompt people taking it early as well? Possibly is the way that we're communicating the benefits part of the problem.
Yeah, so basically what we found through the research is that if you could kind of incentivize the playbook to get people to claim it as soon as possible is to send it at 59 and tell them, congratulations, you're eligible for this government benefit because you better take it now. And that was really what people were, that was kind of, so fortunately, the communications of Retrait Quebec and Service Canada has actually changed, which is great. Letting people know this important decision exists before the decision, the pivotal moment is great to get people to actually think through their options. Mickey. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of stuff around, communication, the right message at the right time, and giving people time. And we know that book, Fast and Slow Thinking, getting people to use their slow mind, not their fast mind. So yeah, there's, I mean, we have an entire research paper just on this topic alone, paper step number 4. So anyone's interested in that topic, I'd invite them to look it up.
When Bonnie Jean flashed up the cover page of the research report that we did in this, it actually said 2 solutions. The other solution dealt with governance and who's in charge and who they're representing. And sometimes I think when Service Canada does things like that, it was because the government had another objective in terms of workforce management, getting people out of the workforce to, or early or something like that, or the Service Canada is really being driven by uh, uh, the usual metrics for a call center of processing time and claiming rates and that sort of thing. And they're not doing what you would expect of the sponsor of Canada's biggest multi-employer pension plan, of looking after the interests of the contributors and the beneficiaries.
Thanks, Doug. Note from a financial advisor here saying, I am a financial advisor and will look at this for every client. It is part of the job. So that is, thank you. That's a fantastic thing. And I think some of Bonnie Jean's work previously on this has made it into actually the education material of some of the financial advisors, so that those who are becoming financial advisors these days will already be aware of the importance of this decision. Quick question about OAS. We haven't mentioned OAS here, and that can also be delayed. Would you then, would you recommend delaying OAS as well? Is that a related question? Is that a different question because OAS has maybe different purposes to fill than CPP?
Yeah, so
I'll
OAS,
take that one. I'll
yeah.
take that one because I've been working on it.
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah, it's a different question with very different tax and clawback and phase out issues. And it's actually a tougher choice. I mean, in terms of, we don't have the simple CPP versus RRSP comparison. There are a lot of other moving parts in the OAS claiming decision. I can see merit there as well to deferring, but the factors are different. There's just a lot of different things going on.
Yeah, and also you can't claim at 60, it starts at 65. So
That's
again,
right.
that's for us not the pressing issue because the option's not even there for people.
Yeah.
It's again the people who are in this vulnerable group who are going to rely only on CPP and OAS, and they're claiming at 60 even though they're working full time. Like that's the group we're trying to talk to.
Yeah. Really important question here, which gets at the crux of why this can be potentially low cost. The question is, how can it be actually neutral if, as you said, the majority of people will collect a lot more money on average? If people delay, how can that be actually neutral? And then the second part is, how can the PDG on top of that be actually neutral? Perhaps it's 2 different questions, but let's start with the simpler one.
The Canada Pension Plan Board Investment Board will have your money for longer. And when we say actuarially neutral, we mean we're anticipating their expected return on investments. It's essentially their management expertise, their risk taking, their equity risk premium, and all of that is built into the cost. And you're getting that for longer when you take the money later. And they're not charging you for assuming that risk.
Yeah. So you're basically going to get a free equity premium on your investments. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to explain this, but that's maybe for people in the financial service industry. That's kind of the way
I think
to.
I was thinking of people who maybe don't quite understand the actual equivalence
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, let's pick some more questions. And if you have any more, we have well, actually, we only have 4 more minutes. So we will, I think I already answered whether financial advisors were on board. Would the PDG still apply if someone delays until age 70? And how
Yes.
would that work? In other words, there was a related question that if you delay till 70, but then die at 70, would you actually get, it's the person calculated, it looked like a very large amount. Would that be actually the case?
Yeah, they would get the 10 years of payments. That's how it would work. But yeah, again, their pension. So if right now, according to our math, if someone's getting if they wait from 60 to 70, their pension will go up 222%. If you put in the PDG, the way that gets paid for, if it does go into the adjustment factors, is that your pension will go up 214%. So you've effectively paid for it by accepting a slightly lower pension at that later age, very slightly, pennies on the dollar. But that means that the longer people wait, the more it goes into the adjustments, the slightly lower the pension, the bigger the guarantee becomes. So it's quite an elegant solution because the people who would get benefit the most in a way pay for it the most as well. But again, as we already discussed, the the cost is very low for these options in general.
The cost is low because not that many people die in their 60s. Everybody knows somebody who did, but there just aren't that many of them overall. You mentioned the 214% again. I know there's a question that you didn't get to about other things that are going on. And one of the big ones is the fact that the YMP goes up faster than the indexing on the pensions. And yes, that's part of it. The 214 is a bit of a lowball estimate of what's going to happen.
Nonetheless, there's a final question from a financial planner. The argument that I struggle with is the idea that if a person takes CPP early and invests it at some fantasy rate of return, and ends up with more, is that as much of a delusion as it looks like?
Yeah, Doug and I are actually working on an article right now on that point, and you just have to remind your client that they can't have their cake and eat it too. They want to do this comparison of I can invest the money myself. Well, you can't create delusional rates because then you have to actually model the risk. And the risk is, like I said, I already actually did this study with the most sophisticated tool that we had available. And the risk is that 8 times out of 10, you were going to run out of money before your CPP, you would lose out on the CPP. So again, to that client, you'd have to just say, okay, let's look at those numbers, but we have to look at guaranteed government bond return rate because that's the only thing we have that's going to actually give you that promised benefits like you would get for your CPP.
I would tell that
Well,
client that pensions are like bonds and you should take them out of the bond part of your portfolio, not that illusion, that wonderful equity part.
Well, I think we have run out of time. Thank you so much for a really rich discussion here. We do have some questions that are left over, and we have all of them. If you've put your name and we have your name, then we can get back to you. If you just submitted an anonymous response or an anonymous question, then we probably don't have a way. However, you can try to get in touch with us. Certainly, if you email the address that you see there and forward your questions there, that would be very helpful. So thank you to everyone who posted questions, everybody who came, and of course to our speakers, Bonnie Jean McDonald and Doug Chandler. Thank you so much, and on behalf of the NIA, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.